And thank you so much for joining us as we talk about the power of pre-application conversations and how it can help you be successful in your MBA applications. I'm Jen T with Aringo, and I'm here to kind of share a little bit about the application process. And I'll first tell you about Aringo. So we are a full service admissions MBA consulting firm. And so we help clients get into top MBA programs across the globe every season, every cycle. And so we offer everything from deciding on what your strategy is, choosing a school list, to working on your essays, resume, letters of recommendation, and yes, interviews as well. So we can help with everything and even more. And we've helped about 4,000 people over the past 20 years get into these top MBA programs. If you're looking for specific statistics, you can look at our website and get more information. All right. So as we prepare for our conversation today, I think the first thing is talk a little bit about the application process and how you prepare for that. Then we'll talk about the 3 conversations you need to have with the admissions committee, some current students and alumni, and then I'll share about how to take your notes and how to use them later. So first, as part of the application process, you want to do some self introspection. You want to think about, what does this MBA mean to me? Why do I want to do this? What am I looking for? And then you want to look at school research and decide, okay, which schools are the best fit for me so that I can narrow down my list and apply to schools that are on my target or in target. And then you want to start those applications. It does take a little while to actually put an application together. So make sure you give yourself plenty of time. All right. So in the self-evaluation, you want to assess your strengths and weaknesses and understand those motivations and goals. And so this is kind of how you're going to decide on which school is the best fit because, are you looking for a specific type of industry and a location that corresponds with it? Or are you looking for a specific type of experience, like on like a college campus experience versus a setting where you might be in a big city like New York or Chicago? And then the motivations and goals is thinking about, what are you going to do after the MBA and what are you going to use the education for? And that can also factor into your MBA research. So obviously there's lots of big names. You can call them M7, T10, HSW, T15. There's a lot of different nomenclatures around this, but essentially what you need to know is there's obviously going to be famous world-renowned schools. The US tends to be a little bit more popular because they come with the university branding that they're part of. So Harvard Business School is part of Harvard, and INSEAD is part of INSEAD only. So they're standalone business schools, so they don't have the same name brand as maybe a school like Oxford does when you're thinking about the name brands and their reach. So those are a little bit of a difference between the US and European schools. European schools are tending to be a little bit shorter, 1 year to a year and a half. Some of them will have internships and some of them won't, whereas most of the US schools are going to be 2 year with an internship in between year 1 and year 2. So when you're looking at these schools, you want to think about where you want to be afterwards. What company do you want to work at? What role do you want to have? And which schools will best serve that, as well as where do you want to live? So always consider location. The location is going to help you with deciding, okay, when I graduate in the US, I'm likely going to work somewhere in the US, right? Like, could be different regions. If you graduate in the Northeast, there is a high likelihood you would be working in the Northeast, maybe Midwest, but, also still the possibility of West Coast. But when we talk about US schools, typically you're not going to be placed in Europe or UK right out of the MBA program, but the same would be true vice versa. So if you're going to a UK school, they're typically not going to place you right immediately into the US. You can look at the school ranking, the cost of the program, so you can start to consider your return on investment. Look at the school specialties concentrations. So if you're interested in tech, healthcare, AI, finance, there's specific schools that offer a track that you can follow to have all your electives really tailored towards that specific concentration or area of interest, and give you kind of that insight for the industry to make sure that you have the latest information and understand how it works and how it applies to the industry, and make you an asset to any company as you're exiting the MBA program. You want to think about what recruiters or companies are going to be recruiting at that school, so you can look at their employment report and be able to see who is typically on campus recruiting for candidates there. Teaching methods, there's the case method, the Chicago method, there's all kinds of different ways to learn. And so I would look into the curriculum, how students are typically studying. For most MBA programs, it's going to be hands-on action learning. So you'll have case studies and group projects quite often. And so that does make it quite interactive and help you with building your teamwork and leadership as well. Lastly, you want to also consider the school size. So some MBA programs can range from 300 students at like Haas to 900 students at HBS. So deciding, okay, I want to be in a really big program so I can have a large network, or I want something close-knit and tight, where I know everybody who went to school with me at the same time, likely took a class with them, went to events with them, and really have this tight-knit circle. Then you want to make your school list, and that school list will help you with kind of deciding, okay, a reach school is something that's, when you look at the class profile of that school, is slightly above where you're at as far as your GPA, years of work experience, GMAT or GRE score. And then target is, you're right there in range. And then the safety schools are a little bit below where you're at for your profile. So students will typically apply to about 4 to 7 schools throughout the application cycle, and those can be all in one cycle or broken up amongst the first and the second cycle, or the second and the third, depending on what your strategy is. And so here's a little bit about planning your time and how you take this action, as far as round 1 and round 2 and kind of a good timeline to follow. But if you're planning on applying to round 1 this year, it's time to get started and working on your applications. It does take about 4 to 5 weeks to work on the first application, go through multiple revisions, and really feel good about the essays, the resume, and everything that you're submitting to the school, because it needs to be well-versed, concise, and direct to the point, so that anybody reviewing the application can really get to know you quickly, and be able to understand the achievements and impact that you've had over the past 4 to 5 years in your work experience. All right, so these are the 3 conversations that you need to have before you submit your application. And it could vary, but essentially before you finish tailoring that application, you want to make sure that you've spoken to these 3 people. So one is the admissions committee, very easy to get in touch with. They are the ones typically doing the outreach. They host open houses, information sessions, coffee chats, etc. So you want to attend maybe 1 or 2 of these events and kind of get your name out there. Then the current students are going to give you a lot more context to the program and how it relates to you. So I'm going to talk about some tips of how to reach out to them and what you should be asking. Alumni are going to give you some perspective on the post-grad experience. And then they can also give you a little bit more insight to the industry or concentration that you're focused on, and how you can best utilize your time in the MBA program to be successful afterwards. So with AdComs, again, very easy to get a hold of. They pretty much put their information out there for anybody to kind of contact or engage with them, either in sessions or in person at MBA fairs and others. other events. So if you're talking to them, you want to ask them qualitative questions. You don't want to ask them something that you can find on the website, because it really does give the admissions committee a bit of a clue that, wow, you really aren't that interested in our program if you don't even know when our round one deadline is or how many people are part of the classroom. I would say that if you're like at an MBA fair or something like that, where you're kind of bouncing around from table to table, it's okay to say, hey, I've heard of your school, but I want to learn more. Tell me about your class and your class size. How close knit are they? Tell me about a couple of the activities that the class does together as a cohort, or maybe how they break down into smaller groups. Those are the types of questions that are going to help get you more information that you can utilize in your application and your essays. So current students sometimes can be really hard depending on where we are in the school year, whether it is exam time or, this summer, whenever they're going to be out of school and typically moving on to their internships or graduating and heading to their full-time jobs. So it can be a little bit tricky over the summer or the holidays, but schools do recognize that you'll want to talk to them. So they'll either host coffee chats for you to get to know specific students that volunteered over the summer on specific dates. So they do try to make them available. And then there's other ways to kind of get to know them or reach out to them more specifically. When you're chatting with current students, you want to talk about student life and kind of, how, what's your experience? Tell me more about your interactions with your cohort. What's your favorite part of the program, etc. You can ask them about, classes, how the projects go, anything that made them really excited about attending this specific school program. What about any faculty members or classes that have been really surprising? Those types of things. You can also talk to them about career services, right? Like, how did you get your internship? How is recruiting going? What about, are you getting ready for full-time recruitment? Tell me all about it. And then you can ask them for advice about the application process. I wouldn't go as far as to say, like, will you review my application for me or my essays? But you can ask them, hey, what's your advice as I start my application? And they can give you some insights for what worked for them and possibly for their classmates as well. So Wharton is a great example of a school that you want to kind of look at to see how you can engage with students. So they have a great example for us. So if we look at their events page, and I literally went into my browser and said Wharton MBA events and quickly found this. And so you can see they're hosting a coffee chat on June 13th. And this is a way for you to get in contact with the admissions team. So this is a great way to, speak with them one-on-one. Sometimes these coffee chats will also be with current students. So kind of look at the description to see who is going to be leading the conversation. The next thing that you can see is when I look at the Wharton student life, I can look at, I also put this into the search bar and said, Wharton student life or Wharton MBA clubs. And this came up. And you can see they have a breakdown here in the middle of the page of, you can look at all their clubs or specific clubs. And this is kind of how you'll start your search to say, like, okay, I want to find a current student with some sort of connection that I can make with them. So one club that I was able to look at and find within the professional section is the Energy Club. Now, you can notice that the Energy Club has a website and an email address on here. So not all of the clubs had this. So, you'll have to kind of tweak your methods and what programs what clubs you're looking at. But this is a great way to see, like, okay, I can probably get some contact information here. So when I click on the website, it takes me to the Energy Clubs page, and then I can go to the About the Club or Contact Me page, and I can see some folks that, okay, I am interested in sustainability, and I want to move from the oil and gas sector. And I know that I can reach out to Brian, Mac, or Stephanie and say, hey, I'm, interested in making this move from oil and gas to sustainable energy. And I'd love to speak with somebody from the club or can you make a connection for me to learn more about, the club, but also the curriculum and being an MBA student at Wharton. And hopefully they'll reach back out to you and connect you or speak with you personally about their experience. And so from that, you want to kind of take those notes and say, okay, I'm going to file this away for later, and I'm going to use it in my essays or again my interview. So this is just an example from Wharton, but this is pretty similar for most MBA programs. They're going to have the ability to access student groups either through a website or email, or even if you did a search for them, likely you're going to find like a Facebook or a LinkedIn page. Some schools keep it with low contact to the students. And so if you may have to fill out a form to get a connection, but that's okay too. So you just, again, kind of tailor it a little bit to say, I'd like to speak with somebody from the Energy Club as I'm interested in making this transition from oil and gas to sustainability, and would like to connect with some current students and find out what they're able to do extracurricularly in the program. So with alumni, it's a little bit harder here. And so you can do the, LinkedIn search to find them, but you can also look within your own networks. So consider your employer. Is there a way to look through your company's profiles to see who went to what MBA? Feel free to reach out to your superiors and kind of ask them a little bit about like, hey, do you know anybody who went to this MBA program? Maybe there's something there. You can also look at your undergrad. Talk to people who are in your cohort or your batch and find out like, hey, who went to, Wharton for their MBA. I'd love to connect with somebody about that. You can even, I know that this feels so silly, but you can even put that on your LinkedIn profile or your Facebook and just easily put that out there and say like, hey, I'm looking to apply to MBA programs. Does anybody know anybody went to the MBA at X, Y, and Z school? And so you can put that out there and see who responds and hopefully get to network with them. The other thing is that some MBA programs do offer for you to opportunities to meet with alumni. So you'll see here that Wharton has arranged an alumni-led coffee chat. And so this is a great opportunity. The other thing I'll say about connecting with students or alumni is that just because the contact that you made doesn't have reference to maybe the concentrations or track that you're most interested in, doesn't mean that it's a dead end. It means that you can always ask them to either connect you with or set you up with other people that they know from their batch or the year before or year after them that were also in that track. And so, feel free to say like, hey, do you know anybody else who's wanting that went through the program and is interested in healthcare management? Whatever it might be, make sure to ask these folks because they have a ton of people at their fingertips that you don't, and they know much more about them because they've spent some quality time going through their MBA together. So when you talk to an alumni, you can also ask them questions about their career path, what industry connections they made during school, how has the school served them post MBA, how have they been involved with the school since they graduated? Are they part of the alumni network? Or, do they, recruit for their job at the school? Ask them anything like that. Then you can also ask them about standing out in the application process as well. So if the school typically has alums do the interviews and this alumni is an interviewer, they likely won't interview you. They'll exclude themselves from your interview. But you can ask them, hey, if you've ever interviewed for Columbia is a great example. So if you've ever interviewed for Columbia, what do you look for in a candidate? How can I be make sure that I get to stand out and I'm really making sure to answer the questions you may have. So that's a great way to really get some information from them that'll be useful. Now, the next step to this whole process is making sure you're taking good notes. I have what I call like a school tracker that is essentially just an Excel doc where each one of the tabs is set up for a different school. So you can kind of start to take note of who you've spoken with, when you spoke with them, and what you learned from them. And so this is just the basics, right? So you want to kind of remember, how did I meet this person? What did I learn from them? What their contact information is? And, did I send them a follow-up message or not? So the example I'll put here is, or talk about here, is the second event. So the student panel. So a lot of the times, they'll have some sort of topic that they're going to be talking about, like the career search during the pandemic. And then there were specific people that were part of it. But you learned enough from that. You don't need to do any sort of follow-up. And so you can kind of just put it there. And then later on, if you're like, oh man, I remember that Stephanie said that, this is kind of what they were able to do during the career search remotely. I want to hear more about that. So now you have the student name and you can go back and write an email, connect with them on LinkedIn, whichever, and say, hey, Stephanie, back in September, I saw the webinar that you were part of and talking about the career search. You had mentioned something I was really interested in. Can you tell me more about this, ... So you're making this connection, you're giving them the reference, you're showing them that you put the work in, and they're going to be even more invested in returning your email and providing you with insight. I also put, and this is like a tracking document. You guys are welcome to email me and I will send it to you if you don't want to create your own. But I also added this like key factors section over to the side, like for Darden specifically, like they have a healthcare focus. They, their location for me has family nearby, and my Uncle Tony went. This isn't really about me, but anyways, like these are some notes or some examples you could have. Also, like one thing about Darden is that they refer to their campus as the grounds. So thinking about if you want to reference that somewhere in your essay of like, I can't wait to step foot on the grounds and really absorb the culture and excitement, as or the height of the energy during orientation or something like that. That you're showing them again that you get them, you understand them, and you're reusing their own terminology. So that's how you take notes. Would love to answer any questions that you guys might have. Feel free to reach out to me via email, or there's a link here where you can reach out to set up a profile evaluation to see how your profile compares to the schools that you're interested in, and maybe even kind of talk about your anything that you feel like is a little bit of an anomaly about your profile. I'm here to help, so feel free to reach out. Other than that, I hope you guys have a great day, and thanks so much for joining us.